Ganta Nakami appears to be a regular high school student just like the rest of his classmates, but there's something not so regular about him. It turns out that he suffers from a chronic case of insomnia at night and can only manage to get some sleep when he's at school. One day, he runs into a classmate named Isaki, and after discovering that they both suffer from insomnia, they end up forming an unexpected relationship together. The story begins one morning after another sleepless night when a grumpy and tired-looking Ganta hears noises from his neighbors carrying out their morning routines, and realizes that it's time for him to prepare for school. At school, Ganta's classmate, Motoko, informs the rest of the class that the school is closing down the astronomy club and tells them the story of a girl who committed suicide by jumping from the observatory. Motoko also reveals that after the girl's death, other club members saw her ghost calling to them before they also died, which forced the school to close down the club and turn the observatory into a warehouse. After her story, Motoko's classmates scold her for talking about the ghost and urge her to help out with their preparations for the cultural festival. That's when she tells them that Ganta isn't helping either, pointing out that he's sleeping under some cardboard. Seeing this, the other classmates wake him up and send him to get some boxes from the stairs near the abandoned astronomy club. When he gets there, he sees the door to the observatory is open, so he goes in there to take a nap, but is shocked to see another classmate, a girl named Isaki, is already sleeping there. He quickly realizes that she also suffers from insomnia. The door accidentally gets locked from the outside, so Ganta calls his friend to come help him out before falling asleep beside Isaki. When they wake up, they're both embarrassed because they were sleeping on each other. However, this awkward situation turns out to be the beginning of an unlikely friendship because after that, Ganta and Isaki get closer to each other. Ganta and Isaki finally clear out the abandoned observatory so they have enough space to sleep. To help make their boring sleep-deprived nights a little more interesting, Isaki suggests that they form a club called the Nightly Fun Society. Soon the club is up and running, and the two insomniacs begin exploring their city at night. The next morning, after their first night wandering the city together, Ganta walks into the classroom and locks eyes with Isaki, who is looking extremely delighted to see him. As such, she rushes toward him to greet him, but he just ignores her and walks to his seat. Isaki is perplexed and saddened by his reaction, but suddenly receives a text from him, explaining that he wants to keep their friendship a secret to ensure that people don't find out about their insomnia. For the rest of the day, the both of them talk to each other through texts, and Ganta suggests that they renovate the observatory to their taste. Isaki agrees in no time. They begin secretly making adjustments to the room. Unfortunately, their little secret is discovered rather quickly when a teacher named Miss Kurashiki catches Ganta repairing the locks on the observatory room door. Realizing that the jig is up, he quickly takes full responsibility and tells her that he is the only one involved. But that doesn't work out because Isaki immediately walks into the room. The teacher resumes her interrogation and even suggests that the two have been engaging in sexual activities in secret. It's at this point that Ganta and Isaki decide to reveal the truth to her. They tell the teacher about their insomnia and explain that they need the observatory to help them sleep during the day. Ganta then requests that she allow them to continue using the room, but she explains that she's just a teacher and needs to inform higher authorities because the room was formerly the astronomy club. Hearing this, Ganta and Isaki ask to become members of the club so they can use the room without any issues. However, the teacher reiterates that she must first consult the higher-ups. The next day, Ganta and Isaki are called to the staff room where Miss Kurashiki and another teacher are waiting with the vice principal. The students head to the staff room feeling scared, but are surprised when they see the teachers delighted. One of the teachers informs them that the school is delighted to welcome them to the astronomy club. He explains that the school has been in a tight situation because it didn't have a functioning astronomy club for a while, despite being a school reputed for its exploits in science. Later that day, Ganta begins studying astronomy and working with the telescope. Isaki joins him, and the two spend some quality time together, which further strengthens their bond. The next day at school, Ganta and his buddy, Ukagawa, chat about his new membership in the astronomy club, and a stranger at the school is surprised to hear this when she overhears them. Later, Ganta and Isaki finish up their proposal before taking it to Miss Kurashiki. She observes it and informs them that they'll have to attend the upcoming budget meeting for all the clubs. All club presidents are expected to attend and give presentations to secure their club's funding for the school year. Ganta, who is now the president of the newly reopened astronomy club, claims that he doesn't have any idea what the activities of the club are. Miss Kurashiki isn't an expert in that field either, but she recalls a former club president who performed excellently during her time at the club. After checking the records, she informs them about a former student named Shiromaru who went on to win the astrophotography contest during her time at the club. She then gives them her address so they can go see her after school. Later, Ganta and Isaki take a train to that part of town. They get lost in a rice farm along the way, but they eventually find the place. When they enter the arcade, Shiromaru, who is the manager of the place, immediately identifies them by their uniforms and welcomes them to her house just behind. Desperate to retain their access to the observatory, Ganta is eager to learn about astrophotography so that he can deliver a good presentation. However, she just delays it and cooks some pasta for them. After the meal, Shiromaru finally agrees to teach them since the sun has gone down. She takes them outside and shows them how to use the camera to take amazing pictures of the night sky and explains all of the basics to them. Afterward, Ganta and Isaki prepare to leave and ask if they can come back for more guidance. Shiromaru then promises to drop by the school to check on them from time to time. The next day, Isaki goes for swim practice at the swimming club and afterward heads to the observatory hoping to get some rest. She's surprised to see Shiromaru there with Ganta along with Miss Kurashiki who was in a tent. They all discuss and come up with the ideas for the presentation, and Shiromaru suggests a viewing party. Miss Kurashiki also informs Ganta about another astrophotography contest, and they all encourage him to participate in it. After picking a good location to take pictures later in the night, Ganta and Isaki prepare for another night of exploration in the city. As they walk around town, Ganta expresses how glad he is that he's been able to take advantage of his insomnia and also produce beautiful pictures of the stars. Elsewhere, Shiromaru decides to head out to take some photos and carries her cat Rolo with her. At the site, she makes a pancake and snacks on it while taking shots of the stars. She ends up taking a very beautiful shot, but is reluctant to send it to Ganta and Isaki because of how late it is, and also she doesn't know how they'll react. Eventually, Rolo senses her tension and pushes her thumb to help her send the photo. The moment Ganta and Isaki see the stunning photo, they compliment her work, which makes her feel very proud. The next day at school, Isaki and some of the other girls in her class sit outside and talk about the upcoming seaside camp which will feature the Nanao of Port Festival. These girls also talk about a bridge that is set to make two people fall in love if they go there together. Elsewhere, Ganta and his best friend Ukagawa are playing chess, and Ganta seems to be winning effortlessly. Ukagawa asks him if he'll be attending the Nanao Port Festival, reminding him of the much anticipated fireworks show. Ganta doesn't seem to be interested, so Ukagawa suggests that he take Isaki on a date with him. Hearing this, Ganta immediately gets flustered, and Ukagawa's little scheme to get him rattled works perfectly, so he can even the score. Afterward, he follows Ganta to go see Shiromaru for some more lessons. On the way, they see Isaki and her friends, but Ganta just pretends not to notice them, and Isaki gets a bit sad. When they get to Shiromaru, she scrutinizes Ganta's work so far and gives him instructions to make them better. A while later, Isaki arrives, and when Ukagawa starts to feel like a third wheel, he decides to head home. Inside Shiromaru's house, Ganta shyly asks Isaki to follow him to the fireworks, but claims that it's for taking photos only, and sure enough, she gladly agrees. Over the next few days, the weather forecast predicts cloudy nights and more rain, making it difficult for Ganta to get any good shots of the sky. One night, a classmate named Rui, who Ganta doesn't like very much, spots him wandering late at night. At school, he confronts Ganta about it, and a teacher named Mr. Hakui, who overhears them and scolds them for staying up late, but Ganta gets upset and insults the teacher. Later, Isaki senses his bad mood and attempts to cheer him up by promising to meet up at the beach if the weather cheers up at night. Afterward, she joins him to sleep in the observatory. The next morning, Ganta opens his curtains and is delighted to see that the weather has cleared up because this means that he gets to go to the beach with Isaki. It's the same morning that his class would travel to Seaside Camp, so when Ganta gets to school, the bus is already prepared. On the bus, Isaki and her friends suggest playing some games to keep themselves from getting bored. Ganta, on the other hand, just wants to get some sleep, but that's quite difficult because Rui, who's in the same group as him, just pesters him throughout the trip. When they get to the campgrounds, the different groups take up different responsibilities, like cooking, fetching firewood, and setting up tents. At night, the girls play some games in their tents, while Rui and the other boys try to look for ways to get into the girls' tent. Their plots are quickly foiled by Mr. Hakui, who came on the trip to supervise their activities. Later that night, Ganta tries his best to fall asleep so he'll be able to survive Mr. Hakui's morning exercise drills, but unfortunately, the snoring of the other boys doesn't let him. The next morning, Ganta is extremely exhausted while jogging, but still manages to do it. When night falls again, he goes to the beach to take some pictures of the clear night sky. There, he meets Isaki, and the two frolic around the shores for a bit. Ganta then notices that the water is reflecting the stars, and decides to take pictures of it. Later, Isaki suggests that they sleep together on the beach. The two insomniacs admit that they've had the best sleep, while snuggling together, and Isaki proceeds to lie on Ganta's chest before they both fall asleep. The next day, the class returns to school from the camping trip. Shiromaru visits the school observatory to check up on Ganta and Isaki. They show her the pictures they took on the beach, and once again, she points out some errors but admits that Ganta did a good job overall. Later that day, Ukigawa catches Ganta starting at the pictures he took of Isaki on the beach. Not long after, Isaki joins them, and Ukigawa asks how preparations for their meteor shower viewing party are going. He also suggests that they hold a training camp for their club. Afterward, Ganta and Isaki ask a student named Nono to help them draw a poster to advertise the viewing party, and she does. After that, they decide to recruit members into the astronomy club to help them disperse the flyers around town. By the end of the day, Ganta manages to recruit 3 of Isaki's friends named Anamizu, Nono, and Motoko to join himself, Isaki, and Ukigawa. Later that day, he goes to see Shiromaru to ask if he can go ahead with the training camp idea, and she tells him that she's okay with it as long as he's only doing it for astrophotography and doesn't have ulterior motives. In the evening, the gang has dinner at Motoko's family restaurant, and Ganta is starting to feel a bit anxious about the entire contest, but Miss Kurashiki encourages him. The next day, Ganta and the rest of the crew begin handing out the flyers for the upcoming viewing party. They start on the streets, and initially, they don't have much luck because people don't seem to be interested, but eventually, they manage to share a decent number of posters. Afterward, Ganta thanks them and takes the remaining flyers from the girls so they can go home and prepare for the fireworks they should watch from the school roof later that night. Later, when Ganta goes to pick up Isaki, he's mesmerized by how stunning she looks in her traditional Japanese attire. At school, the other girls arrive and they all have a good time while taking beautiful pictures of the fireworks. After the others leave, Ganta and Isaki stay back to put things in order, and she opens up about the reason for her insomnia. It turns out she had a heart condition as a child and developed a fear to sleep at night because she thought she might die in her sleep. Hearing this, Ganta promises to always be there for her whenever she needs him, and keeps his promise the following night when he talks with Isaki all night until she's ready to fall asleep. Soon the semester comes to an end, so Ganta and the other members of the astronomy club are excited for the viewing party that would follow. At lunch, they all chat and talk about their special and hidden talents. Later in the day, the others are wrapping up their preparations for the following day. Ganta walks into the room very unsettled and asks if everything is in place, but he's pleasantly surprised and relieved to see that his friends have put everything in place for the big day. Unfortunately, this joy is short-lived because on the day set aside for the viewing party, there's suddenly heavy rainfall. Ganta feels bad and blames himself for the failure before running away. As a result, Shiromaru and Isaki go out to look for him. Eventually, Isaki finds him and the two share a moment that's interrupted by Shiromaru. Afterwards, Miss Kurashiki treats all of the students to a nice dinner, and Ganta's relieved to find out there will be more meteor showers in the coming weeks. At school, Ganta and Ukigawa submit the final proposal for the training camp to the student council president. Unfortunately, he informs him that the school can't provide any funding for the trip because the astronomy club is still in its infancy. Ganta is bummed to hear this, but refuses to give up. He decides to apply to get a part-time job to pay for the trip all by himself. While the girls go to the beach for some fun, Ukigawa and Ganta go job hunting. However, Ganta fails the interview and doesn't get the job, so he decides to go see Shiromaru for some advice. Luckily, she offers him a job at the arcade and he gladly accepts it. Later, Isaki joins Ganta while he's doing some calculations, and he informs her that even with the job, they still can't afford the trip, so she reveals that her parents gave her permission to stay at her grandmother's house, which is somewhere in the area and that would also allow them to save costs on food. Hearing this, Ganta's hopes are rekindled, and he suggests that for the final spot, they visit the place where Shiromaru took the beautiful picture. It's almost time for Ganta and Isaki to embark on their training camp, so he and Miss Kurashiki visit Isaki's parents to go over the agenda. That's when he discovers that Isaki's older sister, Haya, would be accompanying them on the trip as a chaperone. Next, they visit Ganta's father to go over the plans they've made. The man reveals that he and Ganta have grown very distant over the years, and when Miss Kurashiki asks why, he tells her that it started the night his mother got up and left them while Ganta was asleep. After Ganta's father approves, Ganta goes to finish up some work at the arcade, and Shiromaru gives him some special advice on how to take pictures. That evening, Ganta and Isaki go shopping for the rest of the camping gear. The next day, they set off on the trip with Haya in the driver's seat. After settling into the house, Ganta decides to go out and do some practice shoots. Later that evening, Haya goes out to have a chat with Ganta. She's surprised to find out that he knew about Isaki's heart problems and advises him not to get involved with her out of pity like many other people in her life. On the contrary, Ganta tells her that he thinks very highly of Isaki. Soon, Isaki joins them and they take a very beautiful picture of the city. The next day, after seeing that Isaki is in safe hands, Haya decides to say goodbye to the duo and embark on a trip with her boyfriend. In a flashback scene, we see Ganta waking up as a young boy to find that his mother is nowhere to be found. Fast forward to the present, and we see that Ganta and Isaki have begun their training camp and are headed for their first destination, which is the island of Mitsukejima. When they get there, Ganta acquires camping permits that allow them to set up tents and spend the night at the site. At night, they take stunning pictures of the beautiful island, and Isaki even manages to cajole Ganta into walking along the rock paths on the sea. The next morning, they return to the house and then go shopping for some groceries. Over the next couple of days, they visit the other sites on their list and take breathtaking photos each time. One evening, the two sit together under the stars, and Ganta finally decides to open up about the reason he can't sleep at night. Even though he can't remember when it started, it's obvious that it has something to do with his mother leaving, because Ganta tells Isaki that he is afraid of mornings, because he fears that the next day would always be worse than his last. As he breaks down in tears, Isaki surprises him with a kiss, which leaves them both embarrassed. However, when Ganta panics his way into the water, the two share a laugh, which eases the tension, and Isaki asks that they leave their relationship the way it is till the end of the camping trip. The next morning, Ganta and Isaki wake up to see that it's raining heavily. To make matters worse, the forecast predicts that the weather would be the same for the next few days, and that's not good news for them because it means they'd have to postpone their photo shoots. Thankfully, the rain finally stops the next morning, but the skies are a bit cloudy, so they still can't get good photos. Ganta points out that they're running out of supplies, but Isaki tells him that she's expecting emergency supplies. They go to the train station to wait, and Ganta is pleasantly surprised to see the other members of the astronomy club getting down from a train. Their friends come with enough food and supplies to last them the next few days. After catching up and showing them the beautiful photos they've taken, the girls go out for a fun night while Ganta and Ukigawa remain at home. Ukigawa immediately concludes that Ganta and Isaki are now a thing, but he just gets flustered. After that, Ukigawa tells him that they're all rooting for him and Isaki, which makes Ganta very glad. Later, the girls return, and while they're lighting fireworks, Ukigawa performs a beautiful song. After another day of exciting activities, the friends say their goodbyes and leave. When Ganta and Isaki get back to the house, she receives a call from her parents asking her to come home immediately. However, she refuses because she still has one site left to capture. Ganta tries to talk her out of it, but she insists on staying. She then receives a text from them saying that they'll come to pick her up themselves. Hearing this, Ganta suggests that they tidy the house that they were privileged to stay in. He then surprises her by planning a fake kidnapping so they can go to the Milwaukee site and take their final photo before returning home, and Isaki is very excited by the plan. Even though it's quite risky, Ganta states that they started the journey together, and so it's only right that they finish it together. That brings us to the end of today's recap on the anime Insomniacs After School. I hope you enjoyed this recap as much as I did. Please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and kindly comment below if you would like to see the next part. Bye and thanks for watching. See you next time.